I'm at the Hoot Owl Ranch in Kenton, Oklahoma. My name's Jacqueline Vajunik, and I'm with George Collins. So, George, could you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Springfield, Colorado on the 24th of April, 1948.
Could you tell me a bit about your family and how they got there?
My family, I'm fourth generation from Kenton, and how I got to Springfield is it was the closest doctor. So my dad put my mother in a car and took off to Springfield.
Okay.
That's how I wound up being born in Colorado.
All right. Could you tell me how your family got to Kenton and when?
I had a great-grandfather get here in 1874 from Tennessee. He was in the Civil War, and I don't know a lot of history about him as far as how he got here. Mm-hmm. I know he settled in the Blacksmith Canyon when he got here, and then I had another great-grandfather, Williams, came to Mineral City, and he came from Tennessee, but I don't know the stories of how they got here.
Okay.
And that was about in the 1880s.
What about your grandparents?
My grandparents were born in Kenton,
Mm-hmm.
and I wished I'd had time. I'd have brought a bunch of dates with me, but they were both born in the 1800s, late 1800s, mm-hmm. and both my grandparent Collinses, they passed away in the 50s, mid 50s, and my grandfather Williams, and he died at 87, and my grandmother died at 94. So,
what did your grandparents do here?
they were all ranchers.
Okay.
That came from ranching background. That's pretty much our livelihood in Kenton.
Mm-hmm. Who ran the hotel?
My grandmother Collins ran the hotel in Kenton, and I don't know the dates on that, but I do remember as a child being in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story in our family that Pretty Boy Floyd stayed in that hotel at one time. So
Is he in the register?
he is, supposedly, and my cousin has that register.
Mm-hmm.
I have a registry in 1913 of the people that stayed in it. So
Wow. Where was the hotel located? It was in Kenton.
It was in Kenton on the north side of the street on the west side of town. And Joe Bud Layton lives in that house today.
Okay. Did your parents live there, or you said they were always ranchers, or your grandparents, did they ranch?
Yeah, my grandparents had a ranch up almost on the Colorado border, up to North Crease,
Okay.
which is around the point of Black Mesa. But I think when my grandmother moved to town, my granddad followed pursuit.
Mm-hmm. So 4 generations, were they here before the kind of land rush?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So back then, a person owned whatever you could control, because it was no man's land, and so if you could take care of it, it belonged to you.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the original size of the ranch?
I don't.
Okay.
I know they're a lot bigger than what some of them are today. So.
Right. How about your parents?
Well, my dad went off to the World War II, and when he got home, my grandfather and grandmother Williams lived east of us over here on what was called the old JX Ranch. And he met my mother, and they got married.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1948, he bought a house in Kenton, which consisted of the house and almost a whole city block. Paid $450 for the house and told my mother we'd never live long enough to pay for it. And so I have very faint memories as a real little kid living there.
Does that house still exist?
It still exists, yes. It's just north of the museum.
Okay.
And then, like most young men, they're wanting to get away from home or run on their own. So he went to work in Boise City for a guy named Billy Gowdy. And I went to school, first grade in Keys.
Okay.
And then shortly after that, we went to Western Colorado in Grand Junction.
How old were you when you moved?
I went to the second grade, so probably 7 years old.
Okay. Did you work on the ranch before you moved?
Pardon me? On this?
Yeah. Did you work on, so if your family were ranchers, do you have early memories of
Oh,
working on a
sure.
ranch?
I mean, you know, I was always around my uncles and aunts and everybody else because, you know, that was our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like most young kids, you go through a phase where you don't want to do what your parents want you to do. So you rebel, I guess to say, but it took just a couple of real short years, and I had my cowboy hat and boots back on and ranching. And as I got a little older, I'd come down here in this country and work for some of these people because they were easier to work for than my dad.
So when you moved to Grand Junction, why did you guys move there?
My dad, it was real funny. My dad, for whatever reason, when he was about 17, 18 years old, my grandfather had a brother named Charlie Collins. He went to Nevada chasing the gold. He thought he was going to be a rich man being a gold miner. Well, my granddad and my dad went out there to see him. And for whatever reason, he got, you know, the mining bug, I guess to say, gold fever.
Yeah.
And I had an uncle, my mother had a cousin, not an uncle, a cousin, that lived in Grand Junction, and about that time the uranium was starting to break loose. We conned my dad into coming out there and being a uranium miner.
Okay.
And so we went to western Colorado and did that, but we never could get rid of cows, the horses, you know. It's one of those things that you got to keep them around just to aggravate you, I think.
So then in Colorado, what was the size of your ranch and how many did you have?
Oh, I don't remember the total acres on, you know, as far as deeded, but we had Forest Service permit and BLM permit, and I couldn't really tell you down on acreage, but I can tell you that.
Did you have a lot of cattle? How many more?
No, my dad only run about 100 head.
That sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah.
Because he was also mining, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, that, you know, when Dad was gone, guess who got to take care of the manly duties? I was the only boy and had 3 sisters.
Right. So what were your chores as a child?
Feeding cows, checking cows, and just, you know, you got to bear in mind at my age, and when I was born, one of my other duties was chopping wood for the wood stove. My mother cooked on a wood stove until I was, I was probably about halfway through junior high, or about the end of junior high.
Wow.
My dad went to Montgomery Ward's and bought her a propane gas stove. And she bawled for 2 weeks because she burned everything. Because she had a hard time figuring out how to regulate the new gas stove.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you do chores before school, after school, all the time?
Both, yeah. I had so much to do before I went to school and so much after.
What time did you wake up?
Usually about 5:30, 6 o'clock. You'd scramble around, get out there and get it done.
And when you came home from school, how long would you work?
It depends. Sometimes so dark, you know.
Yeah.
You just depend on what we had going on. And in the winter times when, you know, when things are, they're kind of tough, you're feeding and everything else. Then in the summer, grass comes on, cows eat on their own, and but you still have things like fix fence and, you know, fix a gate on the barn because the cows tore it off, but it seems like it lightens up in the summer.
So a lot of work. So what did your mother do while you were taking care of the cattle? And
my mother actually was a stay-at-home mom until actually I got into high school. In fact, I was a junior in high school. And my folks bought a house in town. and would move us in there through school.
Okay.
Because the little school that we went to only went through the junior high,
Okay.
and there was no high school. So we moved to town. She went to work for J.C. Penney's as a seamstress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the drought of the 1950s? Was your family at all impacted by it?
I remember that faintly. My dad was working for Billy Gowdy, and I remember pulling a chair up. We lived in a house that was kind of L-shaped, and the kitchen was the short end of that L. And I remember pulling a chair up to the back door window, and it almost looked like fudge boiling in a pot. It was just the dust boiling and blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother made my sisters and I go in the bedroom, get under a blanket, and seemed like forever. And then I remember once again crying about sundown. My dad came home. There was probably 2 inches of sand in her living room.
Wow.
Them old houses weren't built like they are today.
Right. Were your
doors leaked, windows leaked, everything.
Were your sisters scared?
Oh, they were too little, I think.
Okay.
You know, I mean, of course, we sat under there with a flashlight till the batteries went dead. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was the only way my mother could keep us from breathing dust, because she had actually had dust pneumonia in the Dust Bowl days
Mm-hmm.
as a child. So she'd experienced,
Story.
you know, some of that
Yeah.
same situation.
Had your parents told you any stories about the Dust Bowl? Or your family?
Oh, sure, they told a lot of
Could
stories.
you tell
but-
me any of them? Do you remember?
Well, I had a grandfather, which his nickname was Pard Collins, and I've been graced with people calling me that same
Mhm.
name. But there was and I can't think the actual name, but a gentleman that studied birds had come out here. Excuse me, and he was off looking for birds and got caught in one of them dust storms
Mm-hmm.
during the Dust Bowl. My grandfather saddled a horse up, rode and finally found him and got him back to the hotel. And shortly after that, of course, my folks lived up the street. Not after that, but we went later when he had come back on another trip. We went
Okay.
up there and he talked about
Oh,
that experience of my grandfather finding him and bringing him to the hotel. And his name was Dr. Sutton. And he wrote a book, and at the very last page of that book, he says, some of my greatest memories is standing by the cook stove with Pard and his son Wesley and their grandson.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's
you know,
nice.
it was kind of neat but I do remember that. I also remember everybody telling me don't back up to the stove or a screen door because of the static electricity bite you.
I hadn't heard that. That makes sense.
And my mother told stories about the old ranch house out there on the jacks and having to take sheets and cram them in the cracks of the windows. My grandmother trying to keep it out of the door of the house and stuff. It fascinates me that all of my family on both sides, they stayed through the entire thing. None of them ever left, and I think they just didn't know where to go. They've been here for so long that, you know, when the Dust Bowl and people started running away from this country, they just rode it out.
Why do you think they stayed?
They didn't know where to go.
Really?
I don't think they, you know, some people took off for California,
Yeah.
a big bunch of them and stuff. And this was home. Like my grandparents, all of them were born here.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was home, so they just didn't know where to go.
So when you were in Colorado, you'd still come to Kenton to visit.
Oh, yes.
So could you tell me what Kenton was like when you were little?
Kenton actually was a pretty nice little town. There was a lot more people in it. And, you know, one of the things I do remember is going down to Mercantile as a kid and buying a candy bar and a soda and sitting out on the step with all the old men and sitting there listening to their stories. Because that's what they did, you know, the community. They'd go to the store and have a cup of coffee and everybody'd sit out on the porch and, you know, tell stories to each other. But, at that time, there was actually some sidewalks in Kenton. And I remember when the old garage was there, you know, and they
Uh-huh.
was the only place you could get gas if you stayed. It was kind of a neat little town.
What else was there? So there was the Mercantile, a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Anything
And
else?
telephone office and the post office and the bank and the church,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 2 churches, the Methodist church and the Baptist church. And that's about all I can remember. I know the Mercantile, they'd sell you anything from a pair of fence pliers to a pair of jeans.
They had everything.
Whatever you
Candy
needed.
bars.
Right. But being 30 miles from Boise City and 48 from Clayton, they had to be
Yeah.
self-surviving.
Do you remember your aunts and uncles or the people who stayed, your grandparents? Did they mostly buy all their stuff in Kenton, or did they have to go to Boise City or
no.
Clayton a lot?
The biggest, well, you got to bear in mind back in those days, both communities were pretty well thriving. Boise City had quite a few stores, and so did Clayton. Clayton was always known more as a cattle town, and Boise City is a farming town. And through time, I think the biggest thing that killed both of them was the government CRP program. Because once they started paying farmers to not plant crops, they didn't need tractors and diesel fuel and hired hands and tires and jeans, and then in that same respect, the cattle people couldn't buy hay or feed, and so things just started imploding, and so I blame a lot of that on the government.
So when would you say that started happening? Those towns started going downhill?
You know, I don't really know because, you know, I didn't live here at that time permanently, so.
Yeah.
But to come back almost every summer, I worked at the sale yard in Clayton and, you know, and whatnot. To come back, you could see it. Even as a kid, you could go, man, that old store we used to go in there and have ice cream on Sunday shut down, you know. There was a store right there in the middle of town. Used to have a little soda fountain. It was always fun for young people. We'd go hang out.
Could you tell me the story of the dinosaur that your family
My granddad found that dinosaur that's in the Sam Noble Museum in the 30s, and he was actually blading that road with a team of horses and hooked that. And he knew it was something special, so he contacted the university, and they sent a paleontologist out here. And apparently that gentleman realized that it was something special. So he got a group of people together to help him excavate it, which is my dad and all my uncles. They're kids, you know. It's pretty much a family deal. But
did any of them have any experience excavating?
oh no. He just took them up there and explained to them. My dad tells stories. He just told them, here's how I want you to do this and be careful. So they dug it out. And hopefully someday I'll get to go see it. I've never seen the dinosaur one.
You need to go. Okay, getting back to you. What did you do for fun as a kid? You sound like you worked a lot.
Well, we did work a lot, but you know, we'd go catfishing. There's a lot of little water holes and whatnot here in the Kenton area, and we'd go catfishing or go swimming in a river. A lot of water holes down there.
Okay.
As kids, you know, we'd go swimming in the
Were
river.
there some places around here to swim?
Oh, sure.
Where?
Well, there's one right here just north of the ranch. Pretty good water hole down there.
Could you still swim there?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to dip, just let me know. I'll point you in the right direction.
Have any of those water holes dried up?
Oh, sure. During the drought, you know,
Yeah.
we've been in a miserable drought, and almost all of them dried up. But we got a good rain last year, and river run for 2 months, so
That's great.
hopefully we're on the mend.
So now there's a watering hole around
Yeah.
here. So you went to a small school. It sounded like a small school. Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, in Keys. In fact, I've got an annual It's probably one of the thinnest annuals in the country. But, you know, it was a neat little school. I even remember my first grade teacher's name. It was Miss Messenger. And that's odd because I don't remember the rest of them, but she must have made an impression on me.
Do you remember how many students were there or how many were in your class?
I don't. I think there was about maybe, I'm going to get really high on this, but maybe 20 first graders.
And then what was your other school like, the one in Colorado?
Oh,
what
when
was
I
the
went
name
to Colorado, it was a bigger school. And then, of course, when I went to high school, my graduating class graduated 127 students.
Okay, so that would be different.
Yes.
So by then, in high school, were you still interested in ranching?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's, you know, it gets in your blood, and it's something you gotta love to do, though.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lifestyle. You don't get rich doing it.
Did your father always have another job and then do the ranching?
Yes. Yeah, he did. And even here, I pick up little odd jobs. You know, you got to. Because it's, like I say, you don't go to the bank every day cowboying. Not like Wall Street, anyway.
Okay, so you graduated what year from high school?
In 1967.
1967, and were you doing rodeo stuff then?
Yeah, through high school, you know, tried to compete a little bit.
Could you tell me a little bit about that history?
Well, I tried saddle broncs and you know, got introduced to the ground quite often. It's you know, it's there again that as a kid you have that in your heart, and you got two issues. You got the want, but then you got to come up with the money. So it's figuring out how to go get a job to make enough money to go rodeo on the weekends. Well, shortly after I got out of high school, then I went to work for the railroad and was just literally gone. So that was kind of a stop to that whole issue, you know, because went to work on a rock crew, and they put me in a little trailer. It was a rail car that had bunks in it and a little kitchen and a wood stove, and that's where we lived. And we'd go for 2 weeks and then have 4 days off.
Where did you travel a lot then?
Yes.
Where'd you go?
Oh, Utah, Colorado, just wherever they needed us. And then, as crazy as it might be, shortly after that, you know, hindsight's 2020. If I'd have stayed with them, I'd have been retired with a nice check. But of course, the Vietnam War was in full swing, and I come home 4 days off and got with a buddy of mine and marched right in the recruiter's office and said, "Let's do it."
Oh wow!
So
you weren't actually drafted?
No, I went to the University of Vietnam on my own accord. Got a real lesson.
Yes, you did. And what did you do when you came home from Vietnam?
I got out in 1971 and went to Ouray, Colorado. Went to work at the Catbird Mine, which is an old gold mine.
Did you find any gold?
Oh yes, yeah. That was like working in a jewelry store. It really was. It was just crystals and yeah. You go underground and it was just phenomenal. But it closed in 1975 or 76, somewhere in there. But I worked there a couple of years, and a real good friend of mine got killed in that mine, and so that moved my direction elsewhere. And
were you ranching? Did you have any cattle?
Oh, I cowboyed for everybody. One of my fond memories is an old rancher there named Louis Weber. And when I wasn't up at that mine, I was horseback checking cows. Yeah, it was in the high country. I've been on the Continental Divide and horseback and been able to look forever both directions. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about riding in that country. You know, and I don't know, it was just the thing about, people need to understand about Ouray, Colorado though. In the wintertime, it's clear and still up there. The snow's clear up to your backside and it's still snowing. you'd shovel out to go to town, and then when you got home, you'd have to leave the snow shovel at your mailbox because you'd have to shovel the snow in to get back at the house. So it was just way too cold, way too cold. And at that, in the wintertime, you put your horses in stalls and in a barn, you just feed them. So I tried to go to a little warmer climate.
Which was?
Glenwood Springs, Colorado.
Okay.
There again, the military taught me to weld, and so I heard they were needing welders at the Mid-Continent Coal and Coke Company. So I went up there and went to welding on that thing. And in my spare time, we packed dudes into the maroon bells and all over Marble and all that country. And still owned horses, you know. And let's see, what really took place? We're digging way back in my history. I gotta think about this. I left Glenwood Springs and went to Grand Junction, Colorado. Went to work at another coal mine and was welding. And shortly there, right after that, I quit them and went to work for Union Oil. And at the oil shale, that big oil shale thing there in Parachute, Colorado. And spent about 2 years up there, and then all of a sudden that thing collapsed and laid off 2,500 men all in one day. And you couldn't buy a job at McDonald's washing dishes. So I cowboyed for different people, you know, around, just pick up day work. And found out that they were needing somebody to take care of the fairgrounds. So I went out there. And we had race meets and fairs and all kinds of stuff. But, you know, due to my background and being around ranching and stuff all my life, that was a fun, easy job, you know, as far as running the fairgrounds. And I was, kind of got hung in the county hook up there, and I worked for that county about 12 years. They took me from the fairgrounds and made me a facilities manager. Took care of all the facilities in town, and then after that went into engineering, surveying and stuff like that. And then threw my hands in the air, got politically burned out. But there on the weekends I helped people like Larry McCoy on the Broken Spoke, Weagle Brand, check cows, Crafts Black. You know, I've never been able to stay away from cattle. I just can't, you know,
What is it that makes them so special to you?
It's something in your heart. You just, you know, if you're a cowboy, you're a cowboy. If you dress like one, you don't have no interest. You're just dressed like one. That's the only way I can explain that. There's something about livestock and the lifestyle that if it ever hooks you, you're just not going to get it turned loose. And so that's part of that. It's kind of crazy. Cowboys are born, not made, and I believe that. I think from the time you're a real small child, there's something that draws you to be outside and, you know, and do that. And I'll even honestly say, I think the best president our country could ever have is a cowboy. Because they've had time to iron out all the problems this country's got, trust me. You're sitting in the middle of a horse for 6-8 hours. You got plenty of time to think about America's problems.
Does Ronald Reagan count as a cowboy or not?
No, he's a movie star.
Okay, I just wondered. Back to that. you went to college at some point. So when did you go to school?
I went to Mesa State College. It was in the interim between me getting out of high school and going to work for the railroad.
Okay.
I went up there and went to college, and there again, you come from a ranching family. You don't have a checkbook or a credit card or anything else. And it was just really tough on me to try to study and work and whatnot. And so I got this wild idea that I would drop out one semester and, try to make some money so I could get at it a little better. And in that interim of me dropping out for one semester, the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad called, and that money looked way better than anything I'd seen.
And what did you study while you were there? But you studied something you loved.
Yeah, I studied archaeology. And because growing up in it's called the West End of Colorado, Nuclear Natarita, the Gateway Country, was just north of Cortez, and a lot of the Anasazi people were there. And we had stuff on our place that, from the time I was small, I'd follow my dad around arrowhead hunting and stuff. And then as I got older, I got that interest. Thought I was going to get rich being an archaeologist. And they're like football players. Only so many play the game. Everybody else sits in the stands, So I went back to Cowboy and starved to death anyway, but I did.
So then you got burnt out on politics when you were working at the city government level. So then what happened?
Well, Terry and I got really crazy. We had gone to Tucson to see her aunt and uncle. And I think it was over Memorial Day or the Labor Day week, one of the two weekends. We'd gone down there. And I was sitting in a chair letting her visit with her aunt, reading the newspaper, and all of a sudden got into one ads and then into real estate. And I said, Terry, there's no restaurant and a saloon in Catalina that's for sale. Let's swing by there on our way out of town and just take a look. And so she says, well, let me call that realtor if that's what you want to do. And we called him and met him up there. And it was the oldest steakhouse and saloon in Tucson.
What year was that?
It was built in 1948. Okay. And the year
that you were looking
at. Jackie, it's got to be 92 maybe. I think it was 92. I'd have to. I'd have to ask the boss.
That's okay. I'll ask the boss. Had you and Terry talked about getting a restaurant or a saloon, or
not until we were on our way home?
So what made you?
I was so sick and tired of the county government and just Grand Junction in general. You just kind of get burned out on the town. I just burned out, and so we got talking about it, and she grew up, her father owned 2 truck stops in Tucson, and had moved to Colorado. That's how we got together, but she had experience in the restaurant business and in the cooking, because they had restaurants, and the truck stops and whatnot. So we got talking about it. She says, well, I think we can make a go of this, if we can put our heads together. And so we sold our place, and that's what we used for the down payment on that restaurant. And we closed on it at 10 a.m. on a Thursday in 1992. We had it 10 days, and we sold it at 10 a.m. on a Thursday in 2002.
Oh, wow.
To the hour, exactly 10 years, which is something. That shocked us. But while I was in Tucson, I'll give you a little bit background about my cowboy. While I was in Tucson, of course, I've always had horses, and I hauled horses down there. Bought a place and built some stalls and an arena and stuff like that. Give a lot of riding lessons to kids. and adults. And I even give a riding lesson to the chief of police of Florence, Arizona. And but then my youngest son Josh, and I got to team pinning, and we team pin twice a week and chase cows, and I wound up going to the national finals and the world finals team pinning. And
wow.
So
what year was that?
Now you really.
It was after 1992.
About 95, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
That's amazing.
And I worked for the Palo Verde Ranch gathering cattle from time to time, and then Terry and I got burned out on the restaurant business and the bar business, which I would advise anybody to never go in. But we finally had a buyer, and we sold that and started looking for a place to live, and we came to Clayton, New Mexico, stayed with my mother, and my Uncle Lewis, which was my idol because he was always known as a cowboy's cowboy. And if you ever have a problem with horses or cows, you ask him and he'd tell you how to iron the problem out. And he told me, he said, why don't you buy the hoot owl? And of course Terry spoke up, and I had snuck her into this old ranch here. It's been 30-some years ago now, and she fell in love with it. And so Lewis said, the man that sold it to me said he'd sell it back. So he picks the phone up, calls Gino. The man's name was Gino Boyd. Said, Gino, was you serious about selling me that old ranch? And Gino told him, sure, I told you I'd sell it back. So Lewis says, well, consider it sold then. And we finalized the deal in Arizona and made a flying trip to Boise City and closed on this place. This old ranch hadn't been lived on in about 50 years. I've known of a few people that would stop down here and stay in this old house for a month or two, but they were more like squatters, and they were staying on Gino, and he probably just didn't know it. But as far as actually occupying this ranch, nobody lived here for about 50 years. We moved here, got a contractor, and the old house we're in tonight was built in 1889. We stripped it plumb down, remodeled it, and then started building corrals and fixing fence and hauling horses in and buying cows.
Would you consider that your retirement? It sounds like a lot of work.
Oh, I don't know if a cowboy ever really retires. It is a lot of work, and it's a work that goes on day in and day out. But I wake up and I grin every morning because I'm doing what I love to do. And how many people are in retirement centers and stuff, and they sat in a factory 30 years and they were miserable, and they're miserable in some senior center, So I think I'm better off. I do. It's and one thing about ranching or cowboying, I work the day at my speed. I don't punch a time clock. I don't answer to anybody. If a fence needs fixed, I go fix it. If I think it'll wait, I'll wait till tomorrow. There's no time schedule to anything. We do have crises like every business. If I get a bunch of cattle get out and they're on the neighbor, and I've raised registered Angus cattle and he's got a grade bull over there, I'm concerned about my cows getting bred by a non-registered bull. So sure, that's a panic time. You go get them real quick. But
what about drought? How do you adapt to drought? What have you learned over the years or learned from your family?
Drought is probably one of the hardest things on a rancher because we depend on buffalo grass to feed our cattle in the summer. And you can take them up to about November, and sometimes if we're real lucky, into December. And then you start feeding, and you feed up till April. First part of May. The drought takes that all away. You feed all winter, and then you feed all summer. And so you have to start putting a pencil to the paper, and you cannot justify feeding cattle year-round. So the way you compensate that, you keep the acreage, but you start selling your cattle off. Mm-hmm. And you sell it down to where you think you can withstand it. And if that continues, you sell them all. Mm-hmm. Just and wait and pray for rain. Wait till it comes back, and you buy cows. But it's that's the hardest thing on us we have.
Can I ask you, how do you make the decision to sell them all? I mean, what do you wait until a certain period and just try to get by selling some?
There's different theories about it. I gradually walked into this through this drought, because I didn't want to sell all of them.
Yeah.
But I've known ranchers in this area that just sold every one of them, put the money in the bank. Mm-hmm. But by doing that, you're living on that money and you have no income. Your life still goes on and there's no income at all.
Sure.
I cut way back, but I still got a few cows having calves that's bringing me a little bit of income, mm-hmm. And even that is scary. You got to juggle it, or your hay and your feed costing you more than what the calves are coming on the ground. If that's the case, you're still in a lose-lose situation. So, yeah, you got to definitely know how to figure a checkbook and keep it balanced.
So where would you say you learned those skills? Is that stuff you learned from your family?
Yeah, from my parents and stuff. Both of my grandfathers run cattle. And my grandfather Williams, in the 50s, they had a bad drought in this country. And he finally threw his hands in the air and he said, I've had all I can stand. I'm just done. I can't keep fighting this over and over. So he called a cattle buyer, sold his cattle. The day the trucks showed up, they had to take a county maintainer and drag him into the ranch because the rain's so bad that the mud was so deep they couldn't get him in there. And my grandmother asked him, says, Jack, are you going to go buy more cows? He said, no, I told you I was done. And he really was done. He quit. So just retired on, he had about 2,000 head. So.
Have you ever come close to quitting?
Oh, about once a week. You get frustrated.
Really, though?
No, honesty, no. I think it's something that this is probably what I want to die doing. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know. There's an old saying: you can take the cowboy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the cowboy. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it'll ever go away. I can't see myself doing anything else. Mm-hmm. Some people have that ability to just flip the light switch and change jobs and just be totally happy with it.
Yeah.
But I just don't see anything else. Yeah. And I think it's a freedom. That's one thing that most working Americans don't have is the freedom to just do it your way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Hoot Owl Ranch?
There was a gentleman named Crit Allen actually built this house. I understand through the museum that he was the man that put the first phone system in between Kenton and Clayton. And lived here quite a few years, I guess. And then after that, he sold out, and it went to D.K. Lord on the store in Kenton. Mm-hmm. Bought this place, and then D.K. Lord sold it to another gentleman. Of course, they were passing it pretty quick back then, and my mother's oldest brother bought it, and he ranched here and cowboyed here, and then he sold it to a man named Geno Boyd.
Okay, when did he sell it?
It was in the late 50s, early 60s, somewhere in there.
Was it due to the drought, or he just decided?
No, his father-in-law, his name was Charlie Wiggins. And Charlie, I'm not saying anything bad about people or a man, but we all have pipe dreams that are stupid sometimes. And Charlie Wiggins conned my uncle into selling this ranch, moving to Minnesota, and running a dairy for him.
Oh, okay.
And you can't take a cowboy, and even though there's cows, and put him inside a building every day. He was up there about 3 years and jumped ship. It was too cold, and he just couldn't. He had to be horsebacking out in the middle of cows, and so he came home. Of course, by then Gino owned it, and I think Lewis felt guilty, even though Gino told him that he'd sell it back to him. I think Lewis felt kind of guilty that he didn't make it, and he told everybody these big plans of making all this money in the dairy, and it didn't happen. So he moved to Clayton, and he cowboyed for Kelly Pushbacher and some of them other folks in that country, and then went to work for the sale barn over there, and run the sale yard for 27 years.
Wow.
And always owned cows. He always had a place leased somewhere and run cattle.
How would you say ranching has changed from your father's lifetime through your lifetime?
Well, almost every bit of it. It's amazing. Technology's changed. We still brand like my grandfather did, where we rope calves, drag them to a fire and brand them and dehorn them and whatnot. But we use propane pots instead of building a fire on the ground, and we have squeeze chutes, and we have check our cows on four-wheelers, and it's just, I don't think everything about it. Our medicines have improved, and I actually think the quality of the cattle have improved quite a bit. We're eating a lot better beef today than they did in my father's when he was young, and so. But with all that, costs go along with that. So, that's a big change also. And in reality, I think in the ranching business, a lot of it's relative, because as costs gone up, cows have gone up. But cattle have never been equal to anything else, because we're one of the few industries in the United States that somebody else dictates the price of our product. A car dealer, he can charge you what he wants for a car, or go to the grocery store, they're going to tell you what a loaf of bread is.
Right.
You go to the sale barn, you get to pick what you pay me for my cows.
Right.
And something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, I could see that.
But it started back in the trail in cattle drive days, because these gentlemen would take these cattle and drive them to Dodge City, Kansas, or Fort Worth, or the big railheads, and after being on a cattle drive for a month or 2 months, when you got there, the guy'd tell you, well, I'm going to give you $2 a head for them. You couldn't tell him no, because you couldn't turn around and take it back. So that's what started that whole issue, was you couldn't go down there and say, I want $3 for them, and he'd pay you. You had to take whatever they'd give you.
George, do you think the cowboy, as in cowboy, has a future? Because you're talking about all these changes like four-wheelers and stuff like that versus what you experienced as a cowboy.
We're truly a dying breed. There's a few young people in the world, and I've got sons that have kind of followed my footsteps, and I hope someday they continue on with that tradition. But overall, I think saddling a horse up and going checking cows and things is almost a thing of the past. Most people get in a feed truck, drive out in the pasture, count their cows and dump a little cake, and are done with it, or on a four-wheeler, and and saddling up at at the ranch and the corral and riding out the pasture to check them's almost a thing in the past. We still use our horses in the corrals, and if we, in a pasture, if we have a cow that's sick or something like that, sure, we'll saddle a horse up and go take care of them. Get them cut off, put in. Calf needs doctored, we'll rope them in the pasture, but the rest of it's pretty well out the window.
Could you tell me how the area has changed since you were young? I mean, do you notice different trees or species or grasses or lack of grasses or water, just any kinds of changes, or is it the same?
Kenton looks identical to it did when I was a child.
It does.
As far as the flora and fauna and stuff that's here. The only thing that's changed is the people in town.
Wow.
We only have 16 or 17 there now.
Wow.
You know, and
what about the animals?
oh, they're just the same.
The same.
Yeah, well, let me take that back. We've had an influx of elk that's moved in from the Rocky Mountains. But you know, I've heard stories they came from the plains to start with, so maybe they're just going
Coming
home.
back.
You know, and we have elk and we have Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep here at Kenton, but they were brought in by Colorado Fish and Game, and they brought a bunch in New Mexico, and I think they'll migrate in here. One thing we are starting to see in this area, on a small number, are wild hogs, and which we're deathly against those because they're a nuisance and they're as bad as prairie dogs. You know, they don't do you any good.
Do people eat them around here?
We just shoot them. They tear up everything.
Yeah.
They just tear up. They're so destructive. And, you know, an old sow will have 6 or 8, 10 little ones.
Yeah, fast. They
Maybe
reproduce
twice a
fast.
year. And then they'll have 6 or 8 or 10. And so if you don't control that population, they'll destroy your rats.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for the next generation of ranchers?
Yeah, I guess if it's in your heart, jump in with both feet. Go for it. You know, it's something you're not going to get rich doing, but if you love doing it, you won't trade it for the world. There's no way I would trade what I do today to be sitting in some corporate office under an air conditioner. Because that money, what I do is worth way, way more than what that person makes in salary. And they've got all the toys, but I got all the freedom. And Terry and I have a little bed and breakfast here, and I say this to a lot of our guests. What brought you to the Hoot Owl? And they will say, well, we like it because of the peace and quiet. We're away from all the people and the noise and the traffic and on and on and on. And they will ask me, why do you live here? And I said, because I'm sick of the people and the noise. I live where they run to.
Yeah.
People take a vacation to get out of that.
Yeah.
And I live where they run to. So put $1 on that one.
You can't. Do you have any other stories for me, George, or anything else you'd like to end with?
Oh, not really. Not that I can think of offhand.
Okay.
It's just, you know, it's a great place to live.
Yeah, so I'll ask you one more question. What makes Kenton such a great place to live?
The people of Kenton are like a giant family. You know, I mean, my neighbor needs help, Brandon. Every neighbor shows up. You know, we help each other. And it's just, you don't find that in the city. I lived in Tucson, as I told her, 10 years. Waved at the neighbor lady probably every other day, and she wouldn't even acknowledge I was there. So that's the way it works in big cities, and we're just a happy little place. And we're God-fearing, I can say that.
Okay, well, thank
All right,
you.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.